Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. So there are now even more questions about who paid Farage's Clacton home, or there would be if the media did its job. After admitting to lying about how the house was paid for, Nigel Farage now claims his partner bought it. Now this seems unlikely, as the evidence suggests you can't afford it. However, there are now questions about her own financial affairs after an organisation she ran went into liquidation and two people associated with it have now been convicted of fraud, money laundering and forgery. So a bit of background. Laure Ferrari, supposedly the person who bought the house Farage claims to use in Clacton, although there's no evidence that he actually does, got a few questions to answer about her own funding. See, she was the executive director of a group called the Institute for Direct Democracy. The group was forced into liquidation after the European Commission's anti-fraud unit started investigating the abuse of public funds. Remember that Nigel Farage was also personally guilty of misusing public funds whilst an MEP himself. Again, I will just caution here, if you have someone with a history of misusing public money and they associate with others who misuse public money, if you put them in charge of the entire country's finances, you are inviting the robbers into the bank vault. Do not claim to be surprised if they do the same when they have access to £1 trillion of public funds as they did when it was just a few £100,000. But anyway, this group of Ferraris, she was running it as it was being investigated. She has not herself been convicted of anything or even charged, but the criminal behaviour was on her watch. This week, a court in Belgium convicted two people associated with it for the group of illegally diverting a six-figure sum of public money using fake loan agreements. They donated to Ferrari's group and in return received significant sums of taxpayer-funded subsidies. The donors were part of a right-wing Polish group with ties to Farage's UKIP. But beyond those ties, is there really anything serious for Farage to worry about here? Well, we don't do guilt by association on this channel. I don't anyway. That Farage is the partner of someone who's running a group which had to liquidate because it was being checked out by anti-fraud investigators and has now convicted people of fraud related to it has nothing directly to do with Nigel Farage. However, it does add another interesting dimension to specifically the purchase of the Clacton house. So let's just recap what's going on there. First of all, Nigel Farage claims he would move to Clacton if he became the MP. He didn't do this, but he bought a house in Clacton. Not really sure that's the same as living there if you never used the house, but okay. Farage claims he bought it. Then, after the story was queried by the media, he admitted actually he'd lied and now says that his partner, Laure Ferrari, bought it. Now, why would that be? Well, Farage owns property, so if he had bought the place, he'd have to pay the higher rate of stamp duty. Not that it would have amounted to very much for a wealthy person like Farage, a few tens of thousands of pounds. But rich grifters are famously as tight as a duck's arse no matter how much wealth they accumulate, so maybe avoiding a bit of tax was the reason. Only there's a small problem with this second version of events as well. The house is worth nearly £1 million, and when you add on legal costs and stamp duty and stuff like that, it could easily have been £1 million or more that was paid, and nobody believes Ferrari is that wealthy. Best estimates suggest that maybe she's got assets of a little under £1 million, but that would mean even if she could just about afford it, she'd have had to liquidate all of her assets just to be able to buy the property, and even then she may not have had enough. And no, there's no mortgage involved, by the way. Farage has confirmed that. Farage tried to claim that she was independently wealthy or that her parents had funded her purchase. But her parents live in a fairly ordinary house worth about something like €300,000, according to reports. So her parents aren't wealthy at all. And think about wealth. If you have £1 million, let's say you win £1 million on the lottery, you don't put £1 million in the bank. Nobody does that. It's wasteful. If you have £1 million, you put enough in the bank to cover your cash flow needs, but then you put the rest into an investment fund so you actually make money from it. So someone worth about £1 million is not going to buy £1 million house, especially one they aren't even living in or renting out, because that would mean liquidating wealth, which is earning good returns in your investment fund. For what? An empty house? In other words, Laure Ferrari did not pay for the house in Clacton, almost certainly, but Farage insists that she did. Now, the media can't work out how she could be worth enough to afford it through the money she's known to have received during her life. but Farage insists she's wealthy. Well, where did that wealth come from? The media are convinced not from either her parents or her career, at least not her legitimate career. But the organisation she ran has been found to have been involved in fraud, money laundering and forgery. Investigators didn't have enough evidence to charge Ferrari herself with any crimes, but crimes of a very serious financial nature were committed by the organisation she was running day to day. And Farage is claiming she has more wealth than the media can realistically ascribe to her. That warrants questions. If Farage is actually telling the truth and Ferrari did buy the house outright, where did the money come from? There are now a couple of questions here which are a matter of law. The first is that if Ferrari was just the agent for the purchase of the house, in other words, her name's on it, but the money came from somewhere else, someone else gave her the money for it, there might be a question of tax evasion. Now, if Ferrari did buy the house with her own money, but nobody can really explain how she accumulated enough to do so without a mortgage, and her organisation has now provably been involved in financial crimes, shouldn't there be an investigation into the money trail with the Clacton house? I mean, look at the fuss the media made over Angela Rayner, who definitely used her own money to buy the flat, didn't get involved in any financial crimes, just failed to understand the implications of a trust fund for a kid, which most other people don't understand either. Yet, no interest at all from those same outlets about the much more suspicious purchase of a house in Clacton, which is currently standing empty when there's a shortage of housing. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.